I agree with a number of my colleagues here today that the behavior of the IRS has been inexcusable in regard to this situation. No group or person should be inappropriately scrutinized because of their political affiliation. And the bottom line, unfortunately, is that this is not the first time that this has happened. Focusing on groups because of their political beliefs was wrong when the IRS did it to Greenpeace. It is wrong when the IRS did it to the NAACP, and it's wrong now when they've done it to these 501c4 applicants. Regardless of which party holds power, this behavior has to stop. What I'd like to focus on is how we can reform this process so that it never happens again. Following up on the ranking member and Representative Spears' line of questioning, the Inspector General's report found that the IRS employees in Cincinnati, quote, lacked knowledge of what activities are allowed by tax-exempt organization. It explained in the report that we believe this could be due to a lack of specific guidance on how to determine the primary activity of an IRC 501c4 organization. Treasury regulations state that IRC 501c4 organizations should have social welfare as their, quote, primary activity. However, the regulations do not define how to measure whether social welfare is in an organization's primary activity. So, Mr. Schulman, as the past agency head, in judging whether a 501c4 has conducted an impermissible level of political activity, the IRS applies a wide-ranging, multi-factor facts and circumstances test. Is that correct?
Yeah. First of all, I'm not an expert in 501c4 law and the details of how individual applications are reviewed, but yes, I mean, broadly they look, the IRS looks to see if political activity is the primary activity, which would disqualify an organization from being the 501c4, and the inquiries done, or at least should be done, and is broadly done on a facts and circumstances basis.
Okay, well, someone who is an expert, Professor Ellen April, has explained that the IRS's facts and circumstances test, quote, reached broadly, gives discretion to the administrators, and leaves many organizations and their advisors with little certainty on how to conduct their activity day to day. So, Mr. George, do you believe a clear, bright-line test for what is permissible level of political activity would be helpful to the IRS specialist?
Well, again, I'm going to have to preface my response by saying that the Secretary has delegated tax policy to the Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy. There is no question that clarity in the law and how to implement it would certainly help anyone who's trying to apply the law in this instance.
Has your office made that recommendation?
We have, and one of the recommendations in this report is that the Internal Revenue Service work with the Department of the Treasury for clarity in this area, sir.
Well, I think it's imperative, particularly since primary activity isn't even the standard. It is, according to the Federal law, exclusively. Exclusively is stated twice in 501c4a of the Federal Tax Code. It is stated nowhere primary activity, and yet that is what the standard is that's being used by IRS, and that standard is not even clearly defined. So this is a major loophole that must be addressed. Mr. Woolen, are you intending to revisit these regulations so that taxpayers are on notice of what legal requirements are and how auditors can enforce the rules fairly?
Congressman, the IG's report makes clear that additional guidance in this area is necessary, and we will work with the new acting commissioner to do just that. This is very old guidance. It's in a very complicated area, but we will endeavor to make sure that we can provide as much clarity as possible.
Well, again, I would just hope, based on what the Chair and the Ranking Member indicated with the new Commissioner coming in, you're right, for years we've had this ambiguity. Tax and campaign finance experts have urged the IRS and the Treasury Department to better define electoral advocacy beyond the ambiguous facts and circumstances test, and to set clearer limits for how much political advocacy is too much. But the agencies have failed to respond. So I hope that based on the leadership of this committee, within our oversight and reform role, this is a reform policy that cannot wait, because it did not just happen to this group or set of groups. It's happened before, and it must stop. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. We now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.